Welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at my Moto camping tent that is in this bag. This is my Touratech bag, 35 liters. So this bag carries my tent and my sleeping bag and then my 2 ground tarps and I believe also my rain gear. And it weighs about 15 pounds when you include in this pouch of my Reckless 40. The tent stakes and also the ground stakes. So that fits in this pouch back here. And this is more of a mock-up setup, just to kind of show you how it'll be sitting on the bike. I will have to ask you to bear with the noise in the background. I do live near a fairly busy road, so there's my rain gear, some Gore-Tex pants, and then just a rain-resistant jacket. And then here is a ground tarp and then a military poncho to, I guess, use as an extra rain cover. And then in there is the tent and my sleeping bag. And it's easy enough just to pull these out, although it's easier with one hand. Sorry. It's easier with 2 hands, but it comes out nonetheless, and then the bag can just stay in there for now. So this is a Kelty Grand Mesa 2-person tent, and I have to say the only reason why I got this thing was because it's a reasonable size and it was a reasonable price, about 130 bucks at Cabela's. I hadn't heard of this company at all before then, so I've only really put this thing together a couple times. It's actually really easy. I'll probably just time-lapse setting it up, and then maybe we can talk about a couple other things about it after that. Before I get the Rainfly on, I want to talk about a couple things about the main structure of the tent. One thing is these clips are actually really awesome, the way they lock onto the tent poles, because they hold really securely and they're so easy to get on and off with just one hand. So those are really, really nice. Another thing I like to see is the reinforcement at the bottom where the tent poles terminate at the end, because this is always where the poles will break through, but this has been very heavily reinforced with some thick nylon. That's really nice to see. And I do know, like, having your tarp outside the tent is just a really good way to get water trapped underneath the tent, and that isn't so good. But again, this is just testing purposes. It's a really nice day. I'm going for speed here, not perfection. Another thing to note here is that these tent poles are aluminum, not a composite like fiberglass or carbon fiber. Take your pick when it comes to that. I really don't have a huge preference. So just looking at the height of this portion here, I am, about 5'10", 5'11", and it comes up to about the bottom of my rib cage in terms of height. So if that gives you an idea of how tall this would be, I think that's a good measure. So let's get the Rainfly on now. So this is what it looks like now with the Rainfly on. You can see it has a pretty good sized vestibule, and it also comes with these guy lines that you can pin down as well. I'm not going to do that because it's just not really necessary for this particular instance. It also has some in the middle on all the edges, so you can really cinch this thing down. There is really only this one vent at the top of the Rainfly the ventilation you really get, and the only way you're going to get more is if you use these guy lines and stretch the Rainfly away from that inner mesh. And then to get inside, I mean, this is pretty basic stuff. And this part has Velcro in it, so you can cinch that to the inside, and then you have access to the inside of the tent. So here's one more downside to this tent, and that is that it isn't a true tub design because there is a seam right at the bottom. However, there is a good amount of seam tape on the inside, so I figure that won't be too big of a deal. And then it's about, I don't know, 8 to 10 inches until the mesh starts on the top. So as long as you can keep this part waterproof, you're not going to have any rain just leaking its way into here. And I'd say the overall build quality and construction of this is pretty good, because here's an example of that seam tape. And they put it on all the seams. So I think for 130 bucks, this represents a pretty good value for a tent, especially for this size. The front is wider than the back by a few inches, so that's something to consider as well. The total number of stakes that come with it, and these are these anodized aluminum orange stakes, so they're easy to see. Let me count them up here real quick. The number is 12. It comes with 12 of these aluminum stakes. I do have some of them doubled up, like over here. I've got one through the tarp and one through the tent. I would say if I was going to do this for real and have the tarp tucked underneath the tent. Yeah, there's a lot of cement trucks coming through here today. I wouldn't have any stakes for the tarp because it would be tucked underneath the tent, and then it would just be the tent staked down to the ground. The pack weight of the tent alone, so it states that the pack weight is about 4 to 5 pounds, and I can attest to that. I have weighed it. It's right on the money. So this thing is actually really light, I'd say, for moto camping. If you're a backpacker, you know, it might be on the heavier side if you're doing ultra lightweight backpacking, but when you got a motorcycle, you're not worried about what you have to carry. It's just what the bike has to carry. One more thing I want to talk about is kind of the durability and weight of tents in general. I'll show you this graph right here, and what you'll see is an inverse proportionality between the lightness of a tent and the durability of a tent. So as a tent gets more durable, it gets heavier. As it gets lighter, it gets less durable. And most tents on the market are probably going to be in that yellowy orangey spot in the middle, where you're not going to find any tents that are extremely durable and extremely light, and you're probably not going to find a lot of tents that are extremely heavy yet not very durable. And I would put this tent, just from my initial impressions here, probably towards the middle to, you know, middle and upper left. It's a little bit on the lighter weight, less durable side, simply because, you know, this fabric isn't super thick, but I'd say it's more towards the middle because it does have some nice features like the reinforced termination points. And there are these nice snaps for the Rainfly, so it's really easy to get it on and off. And as you saw in the time lapse, I actually put it on backwards the first time and just had to flip it around, but that only took like, you know, 20 seconds to flip it around. So this is not a difficult tent to put up. You could probably get the whole thing up in, well, I don't even have to guess. The total time it took me, based on my time lapses, was that much time, which really isn't that much. It's, you know, this is a very easy tent. So that's all for now. I will report back with how it holds up over this season and seasons to come. So until next time, see ya. And yes, for anyone who might be curious, everything does pack down into its original configuration. That's the nice thing about having these buckle straps, because you can keep these at a set circumference, and that way you know every time that your tent is being packed down to the same size, so it'll actually fit back in the bag. And the other thing that I do is I have one side tapered down a little tighter than the other, so it's easier to slot down into the bag and then pull back out again, rather than being completely cylindrical and then, you know, being a little tougher. With it being tapered, you put the taper end down, it pulls out straight every time. And one last thing, with the way, or in fact the order that I pack this, I put my rain gear on top, or I put that stuff in last, because if it starts to rain, I can just very quickly open up this dry bag and pull out my raincoat and Gore-Tex pants. The next thing I would put in there is my ground tarp, and then the tent, and then the sleeping bag. So that way when I'm packing, I go sleeping bag, tent, tarp, rain gear. So always pack things in the reverse order that you would need them, so that the things you need first are at the end.